Hi everyone, thanks for joining us here today for the live event. My name is Rohan Bediuncle. I'm a product marketing manager here at OSIsoft. Joining me today is Todd Brown and Elizabeth Mackerlane, who are both product managers for PyCloud. In this live demo, we plan on showing you how easy it is to get your operations data into the cloud, and how you can contextualize that data, quickly and securely share it across enterprises, and structure it for data science enablement, all through the tools available in OCS. Before we get started, I wanted to go through a few housekeeping rules. We do have a comment section below that we're monitoring, so feel free to ask us questions as we go through the demos. We have a couple moderators from the OSIsoft Learning channel that will be answering those questions as we go. At the end of the demo, we'll also take some time to answer some of those questions live on stream. If we do ask a question if you do ask a question and we don't get a chance to answer it, don't worry, we've set up a PySquare post for any follow-up questions. Just go to the post your question in the comment section there, and we'll get back to you. You can find the link to that post in the description of this video. We also have many other resources in the description for you guys, including one to a webinar that was held last week announcing the release of OCS on the Azure Marketplace. So be sure to check out all of those once we finish up. All right, so with that being said, I'll pass it off to Todd to start us off.
Thanks, Rohan. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So PyCloud is here. What is PyCloud? It's our portfolio of cloud-based products for operational data that includes OSIsoft Cloud Services, or OCS. And Elizabeth and I will be talking about OCS today. So here's our agenda. We're going to have an overview of OCS to give a good baseline of what it is, why you might be interested in it. Then we'll start diving into some more details. I'll cover the storage in OCS, assets, and trending. And we'll do some demos along the way as well. And then Elizabeth will come on and talk about Dataviews and how you can integrate your operational data into tools like Power BI and Jupyter Notebooks and others. And then we'll finish up with a demo on showing how we got the data into OCS for our demos, the data ingress. And then at the end, we can take a couple of questions. So let's get started with our overview today. And so let's start off by talking about why customers are using OCS today and for which scenarios. And the first set is around health and safety. And so with COVID-19, the need to be able to work remotely in an effective way has never been more front and center. And OCS makes it easy to see what's going on at the plant from anywhere without being there. Next, remote assets. We have customers monitoring remote assets that have limited IT infrastructure and no support personnel on site. With its integration to the edge, OCS makes this really easy. Expanding on remote assets, we also have customers that are providing value-added monitoring services to their customers. OCS makes it easy for service providers to get access to operations data they need to provide more value to their customers. Digital twins. Customers are creating digital simulations of their assets with the goal to operate as close to possible as the expected predictions. Business intelligence. Many customers use BI tools to enable users in different levels of their organization. Engineers and data scientists use these tools to explore their data and perform visual analytics, while executives get value from the reports and dashboards that provide an overview of the impact to their business. And so OCS is really a great way to supply the operational data to these tools. We also have use cases like predictive maintenance and forecasting and process optimization for machine learning. And more, and these are becoming more and more common in operations. And companies are turning towards the power of machine learning to find patterns that affect their bottom line. And then finally, data sharing is an area where we're also seeing a lot of interest. We have some customers doing this successfully today under certain scenarios. And customers really want an easy way to share operations data with their business partners, service providers, customers, supply chain partners, and others. And we're currently enhancing OCS to expand our data sharing capabilities even further later this year. In the rest of this talk, we'll step through what OCS is and how people are using these capabilities to help address these scenarios. So what is OCS? OSIsoft Cloud Services is a cloud-native, intuitive, multi-tenant, and near-zero maintenance SaaS historian platform designed for real-time operations that's operated and maintained by OSIsoft. OCS was built from the ground up using microservices technology and will help take our customers into the next era of getting value from their operational data. OCS is developer-friendly with modern, secure REST APIs, making the data accessible to a variety of coding environments and a host of applications. So what makes OCS different from other cloud platforms? Well, first, OSIsoft has over 40 years experience in delivering software products and a data infrastructure for industrial operations customers. We have built OCS with this knowledge and with security built in that puts you in control of your operations data that you own and resides in our systems. OCS has seamless integration with the #1 operations data system in the world, the Pi system, and is the world's most valuable data set. It also has seamless integration with our new Edge products like Pi adapters and the Edge data store in ways of easily collecting data and devices from IoT sensors. Customers that have tried OCS have told us that the integration was painless and with just a couple of clicks to the cloud, it was much easier to use than some other platforms they had tried. Third, OCS is built on modern cloud microservices technology and is scalable and makes your operations data securely accessible to the right people without impacting your real-time on-premises systems with heavy data-intensive queries. Next, OCS is a smarter and more secure way of sharing data with your external business partners, service providers, and customers that gives you control over your data and only allows specific data to be shared with specific partners. Finally, because OCS is a software as a service offering that's managed and operated by OSIsoft, you don't have to worry about just deploying servers, installing and updating operating systems, updating our applications with new enhancements or bug fixes. All that is taken care of for you by us, the experts. You also don't need to assemble different microservices together in order to be able to stitch your solution together. We do a lot of that for you with OCS underneath the hood. So now you can really just focus on getting value from your data. So now that you have a good overview of OCS, let's dig into some of the details. And first, I want to talk about data storage within OCS. So within OCS, we have something called the Sequential Data Store, or SDS, as you may hear us say. And that's just a flexible sequential data store that keeps related data together. SDS goes beyond just timestamp and value that you're familiar with from the Pi server. Within SDS, data is stored in a data structure called a stream. And a stream is like a Pi tag, except that it's much more flexible than a Pi tag. The data in a stream can be indexed by time, like Pi, or by another sequence, perhaps by depth, if you're drilling, or maybe by a lab result, or other properties that you can define. Furthermore, a stream can have multiple properties and values, not just a single value like in a Pi tag. So SDS isn't really a time series database like the Pi server is. It's a sequential database of which time is just one of the possible indices. So we're going to move into a demo here, and I want to set up that demo. And it's with a company called Wintopia. And Wintopia has been a customer for 20 years of OSIsoft. They started off in North America with a wind farm that has an on-premises Pi server. And they've grown into multiple sites, including into Europe, as there's been a greater shift in energy to renewables. And they're also investing in offshore wind farms. Wintopia needs to bring all the data together into an integrated operations monitoring and diagnostic center that's remotely monitoring data from all the wind farms globally. And they want to leverage this operational data to optimize their business. So in our first demo, I'm an IT admin here at Wintopia, and we've been expanding the data flowing into our remote monitoring and diagnostic center. We support wind farms from all over the globe, and we're going to go back in and take a look at some of the data streaming in from some of these wind turbines that we have. So I'm going to show you the OCS portal, and then we're going to dive into the sequential data store and take a look at some of the streams and stream types. All right, so let's jump over to our demo. And here we are. So I'm just in my web browser, and I have it kind of blown up in full view just to give us a little bit more real estate here. But this is the OCS portal that you're looking at. And I'm going to go up and click on this button in the upper left-hand corner. It kind of looks like a waffle, or at least that's what my kids tell me. So I'm going to click on that. And this is our navigation. So there's a lot of different things in here, but there's a bunch of different pages that are used to help manage the data in OCS. There's ways of ingressing and collecting data into OCS. There's visualization. It's the trending and asset explorer, which we'll demo later. Dataviews, which helps supply data for analytics purposes that Elizabeth will talk about. A bunch of different things related to security, developer tools, and then support that includes things like documentation and logs and things of that nature. But to start off our demo today, we're going to go into the sequential data store. So I'm going to click on that. And here we are. So what I'm looking at here is all the streams in my production namespace. And if I kind of zoom in here down on the bottom right, we can see that there's a little bit over 53,000 streams in this namespace within this tenant. What I want to do first is I'm going to do a search for active power. And I returned 10 streams here. But it's a little curious. I don't really know why these returned because I don't see active power, what I typed into the search box, in this table at all. But let's click on one and kind of drill into some of the details here on the right side. So we can see some of the details, the stream definition information here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the metadata and tags tab at the top. And let's zoom into this so that you can see it a little bit better. So this is all the metadata that I have defined on this particular stream, this active power stream that I clicked on. And I can tell that this particular stream came from a Pi server because I see a lot of the Pi tag properties here, like point ID and point source and point type, that you're familiar with if you have a Pi server at your site. And so it's nice to see that we brought this forward because it's the context our existing customers have invested in already, and we're preserving that here in OCS. But I also see some other metadata, and there's a field called measurement here that has a value of active power. And so that's why my search returned only those 10 active power streams. It was hitting on that measurement metadata field. And I see another one there called turbine, that's GE03. So OCS lets me extend and add additional context to the streams, which makes it super easy for me to find the information I'm looking for within OCS. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and click on Manage Data just to take a look at some of the data value within this stream. And we can see that it has a single value column called value with a value of 1304 that was written about a year ago. But it has a value, so that's good. And then there's some other properties here that are kind of quality information that's coming from the Pi system where this data originates. Next, I'm going to go back into all of our streams. And you may notice here there's a type ID column, and you see like a lot of simple floats and other things. Those are stream types, and I'm going to actually change my view to look at the types, the stream types in the system, of which there are 32. So stream types are kind of like the schema for the stream. Some of them are pre-built, like all these Pi-related ones, Pi Digital, Pi Float 32, Pi In, so on and so forth. And then some of them are kind of more custom. And what I want to do is take a look at a more complex stream type. And there's one down here at the bottom called wind turbine predictions time. And I'm going to click on that, and let's take a look at that type. And so we can see kind of the schema for this stream type. It has a timestamp and an air temperature and a wind speed, and then the predicted active power. Okay, so that's interesting. Let's go ahead and find the streams that were created from this type. And I can see I have 2 streams created from that type. And let's go ahead and click on one and go ahead and take a look at the data. And instead of just getting the last value this time, let's get a range of values. So I'm just going to jump back in time about a year ago just to make sure that we get some data. And here we go. So we can see that for every record that's stored within this stream, I have the air temperature, a wind speed value, and the predicted active power. And I have a nice little trend here that I can use to kind of flip through all the different properties and take a look at the data real quick. So one of the big differences with OCS is that it has a much more flexible structure for storing your operational data. You can define a stream that stores related data together that has values at the same index. So if you have values stored at the same timestamp, like in this example, that's a good reason to have it be part of the same stream. And if you do that, we make the data ingress and storage and retrieval of this related data more efficient for you. And we're seeing more and more of these types of complex data types, especially when it comes to IoT sensors and devices sending data from the edge. So that's our first demo. Let's recap what we just saw. So as an administrator at Wintopia, I had to configure the system to get value from our operational data that's located in both US and Europe. And we were able to see how flexible streams are for storing operational data, ranging from very simple streams to more complex streams with many properties and even multiple indices if you wanted that as well. And we saw how you can extend the context on streams with metadata to make it easy to find your information in OCS. Next, we're going to talk about how we're adding even more context to OCS with assets. So I'm going to jump back to slides here for a moment. There we go. And talk about assets and trending. And go there. Okay. So assets. So assets are a new contextual layer in OCS that allows you to relate data from multiple streams together. So assets have metadata, similar to streams. They have stream reference properties. So those are just properties that are referencing a series of streams. And then they have an asset status value that helps you monitor a fleet of assets in real time. And I'll be demoing that shortly. Now, one of the very first questions I usually get from existing Pi customers is, does OCS assets have a hierarchical view of the assets just like AF does? And the answer is no, it does not today. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the reasoning behind this design choice for how users find their assets and related information. And so starting with a Pi system in AF, that was really originally designed for a site system, and at a site, finding what you're looking for via hierarchy makes a lot of sense. I kind of equate it to finding information on my own computer. I know exactly what folder I stored that file in, and I can navigate to it easily. For OCS, we ultimately seeing that as being an enterprise and cross-enterprise system with a variety of different user personas and purposes for the data. In this environment, while I'm potentially searching for something outside of what I know, like outside of the folder structure on my computer, I often resort to searching or filtering, or both. So for example, when I'm buying something on Amazon, I first do a search, and then I filter the results down to find exactly what I'm looking for. It's an approach that works for millions of people and billions of products every day. It scales. And so there's some other benefits to this approach as well. As an administrator, I no longer need to maintain a different hierarchy of navigation for different purposes and different consumers of the information. Also, as a user, I now have more ways of finding what I'm looking for. I'm no longer constrained only by the hierarchies that have been created by someone else. And I'll be able to find my assets by any of the metadata available on the asset. So the approach isn't really static, it's more data-driven. When new assets and their metadata are added to the system, it's instantly available to be found without someone creating and maintaining 5 different hierarchies. So these are some of the reasons why we're starting with this flexible data-driven approach in OCS. We think of this approach as more flexible, more functional, and has less work and maintenance, ongoing costs for our customers. And it's better suited for the enterprise and cross-enterprise scenarios we're going to be enabling with OCS today and into the future. So I just want to provide some of that context. And next, I also want to talk a little bit about our visual trending capabilities in OCS. So visual trending enables users to perform root cause analysis of faults and issues on their assets and streams in a nice trending experience. And we also have URL parameter support as well. So in this example that I have at the bottom of the slide here, you can see that you can pass in the different data or the traces. So those are the either streams or asset properties that you want to trend. You can pass in your index. So in this case, it's our time. Our time indexes, cursors can be passed in. So it's a pretty functional URL parameter functionality. And I'll be demoing that here coming up. So I'm going to go into our next demo. So in this demo, I'm a veteran wind turbine subject matter expert, and Windtopia has opened this remote monitoring and diagnostic center and staffed it with experienced engineers like myself. So what I'm going to walk through is our assets functionality. We're going to take a look at some of the wind turbines and then drill into some of the data within our trending investigation tool to take a look at an issue that we're troubleshooting. So I'm going to jump back over into our demo. There we go. And I'm going to go back up to the waffle, or maybe it's a Rubik's Cube this time, because I'm an engineer now. And we're going to go down to the Asset Explorer. Okay, and so what you see here are all the assets that we have in our production namespace within this tenant, and we have 42 of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for Mesa, and that just returned the Black Mesa wind farm, and then 3 wind turbines that are located at that wind farm. And so next I'm going to go ahead and select one of these. We'll do GE05.
Hey, Todd, real quick.
Yeah.
Can we zoom in a little bit?
Yep, absolutely. There we go. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. So we're zoomed in on the static metadata on this asset. So like I said before, metadata helps provide additional context for this asset, such as the wind farm location, the manufacturer, the model, the type, and other properties as well. And as I said, what we're going to be working on soon in OCS is to enable you to search or filter on any of these metadata fields when you're searching for your assets. And what we found with customers with AF is that often a lot of the information that's kind of built into their hierarchies are also built in to as properties on their elements in AF. And in this case, it would be the metadata on the asset when that's in OCS. So that's the metadata. Up here in the upper right, and I'll zoom into that as well so you can see it better, there's an asset type, and that asset type is the GE wind turbine. And I'm not going to go look at the type for now in the interest of time, but asset types define the schema or structure for your assets of that type, and they help you manage a fleet of assets easier and help enforce consistency across similar assets. So you can kind of think of it as like a template in a way for this asset. So just like streams have stream types, assets have asset types. Zoom back out. And I'm going to clear my search and just go back to looking at all the assets now. And I'm going to zoom in on this set here. And you can see that some of these have this little green check mark. And that's because these particular assets have asset status configured on them. And asset status is just a specific property that you define as, hey, this is the asset status. And it can be a string or enum value. And in this case, these assets are all in a good state with a value of system OK. We also have a warning state or a bad state available as well. So you can map values from that stream into one of our 3 multi-states, which helps an operator using this user interface to monitor an asset. They can tell which assets need their attention right now. So we'll zoom back out on that. Next, I'm I'm going to take a look at G10 here and take a look at the properties. And I'm going to minimize this trend here for the moment. And I'm just going to scroll down, and there's a lot of different streams that are mapped into this asset G10. So these are all the reference streams that are mapped in. And you can see that we also provide all the stream properties here as well. So there's a lot of them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just filter on power, because what I want to look at today is the active power, which I'm going to check. And I'm also going to check the expected power as well. And then I'm going to open up my trend here on the bottom. So there we go. We're trending some data. You can see that I can deselect and select the data, and it shows up on my trend. And let's go ahead and look at 7 days of data. We provide a lot of kind of easy, quick ranges for you for easy access for common time periods that you might want to trend your data over. But we'll do 7 days here to start. And so here I have a nice, quick and easy trend that allows me to do some rudimentary analysis on my wind turbine. And additionally, I can go ahead and swap to another asset. So if I click on GE08, I get all of its data. And then if I click on GE09, I can take a look at all that data as well. If I want, I could also add a cursor to the trend and kind of pin that. And in this case, I want to kind of figure out why, my expected power is so high here, but then the active power actually dropped. So it looks like there's some issue there. But I kind of want a bigger real estate to do this analysis. So what I'm going to do is in the bottom right, there's this button here called View Full Trend, and I'm going to click on that, which is going to bring me to my full trending environment. And in this environment, we can see that I have more real estate, and all my context from the Assets Explorer was completely preserved. So the time was passed in, my data was passed in, my cursor is still there. And over here in the search, if we zoom into this, we can see that we pre-populated our search with GE09, which is the asset that I came from. And so now it's really easy for me to add related data to this trend to continue my analysis. Okay, so let's do some analysis here. We're dealing with wind turbines, so from my expert experience, I think wind speed is pretty important. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to the trend. And it's a little hard to see, so I'm just going to select that wind speed from the table down below. And when I do that, it highlights it on the trend for me. And it also provides me some more details. So for example, it might be hard to see, but there's the average wind speed, which was 9.7 meters per second over this time range. And there's 2 dotted cursors, we call those easy cursors, that mark the minimum and maximum wind speed over this time period. So I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm doing analysis, you have peaks and valleys that are kind of near each other, and sometimes it's hard to tell which one's the actual min or max. We just tell you because we're trying to make it easy for you to do that analysis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin these 2 easy cursors for my min and max wind speed and add those. And if you look at the table down here at the bottom, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see it better, you can see for each cursor, and we have 3 in our trend now, we provide the value for each trace at the timestamp, and also the summary value. So we calculate the min, max, average, delta value for you, and also the duration, so that if you're analyzing an event or 2 events, you need to find out what the time is between those. We make that super easy for you. So I'll zoom back out. Yep. And it looks like I need to sign back in, because that's what happens when you do a live demo, right? All right, so let's sign out real quick. Apologies. And I'm just going to exit full screen, sign back in. And it looks like my token had expired, so we'll sign back in. And it looks like I haven't done this for a day or two. So this is a good time to talk about security, and we're using Azure Active Directory at OSIsoft. So in a moment here, and if you can see this on my camera, I'm going to prove it from my watch. And it lets me in because we have two-factor authentication set up. So super secure. Let's go back to our trend. And we're playing the production namespace. And let's go back and we'll do a quick search for GE09. And expected power and active power. There it is. And we had the wind speed, which is there. And so before we were looking at the data over the last 7 days, right? And we had our cursors here, right? And we're looking at this view, and it was getting kind of busy, right? And so my little security incident here helped us out. We had the stacked view as well, which makes it easier to see all the data in stacked mode as well. So continuing my demo here, I'm going to add some temperature data to my trends. And we'll add some gearbox temperatures. So now I have a lot more data. And I also had these pinned before, right? But now that I've added my temperatures and I click on those, you can see the easy cursors are moving along with those as well. So it's an easy way to see if there's some correlation between the peaks and valleys of all my different data with the specific events that I was analyzing before. But I'm going to hide those for now. And there's one more thing that I want to add for my analysis, which is the operating state. And I'm going to add the digital state name this time. And you can see here, what we do for string and enum data is we plot that on a 2D heat map, and that makes it easy for you to tell which time periods have similar values. And when I hover over them with a cursor, I can tell the values. So I'll just do that so you can see it here on the bottom. The values change. And so for this particular time period we're looking at, where the orange active power dropped down and the expected power didn't, we're in this feathering position state, right? So I can see that what feathering positions are in wind turbines is it's really when the blades stop during emergency shutdowns or whenever the wind speed exceeds the maximum rated speed in order to reduce unwanted rotational torque in the event of wind gusts. So we can actually see that, my max wind speed was right here, kind of leading into a period of high winds that then caused us to go into this feathering position state. So then now that I've kind of figured this out, I can go ahead and share this with my colleague Elizabeth. So I just copied the trend into my clipboard. I can email that to her, and then she can open up in her browser, just like I'm going to do right here. And you'll see that she would get all the same data, timestamps, cursors, searches, so that then she can either pick up the analysis where I left off or just understand what I had discovered. So with that, that's the end of our second demo. And so let's recap. As a veteran wind turbine engineer, I was able to find all the Windtopia wind turbines that I needed to monitor and troubleshoot around the world. The Assets Explorer made it easy for me to find my assets that brings all the data from multiple streams together. I was able to monitor those in real time with asset status and do quick investigations and then dive into a more immersive visual training environment. That was easy for me to share with my colleagues like Elizabeth. And then along the way, we discovered security works as well. So that was awesome. But next, Elizabeth is going to show you OCS's data view capabilities and how we get even more insights from your operational data. So we'll transition over to her.
Great. Thank you, Todd. So I will go ahead and share as well. All right, so we're going to start back in our slides over here just for a few minutes. So now that we kind of covered several of the basics around data storage, contextualization, and analysis, we want to talk about some of the other ways that users can dig further into their data, looking at another feature called OCS Dataviews, and also looking closer at the OCS Rest API. So many of the workflows that Todd was previously discussing with his demos really only needed data from a few streams or a few assets at a time. But larger scale analytics or monitoring initiatives will span different types of equipment and even across plants or sites. This is where OCS Dataviews come in to help create decision-ready data. Dataviews allow users to pre-configure their OCS datasets so that they have easy access to specific data that has already been grouped and shaped for consumption. Then, when an application or data scientist needs access to that set of data, they can simply query the data view via the OCS Rest API. This flexibility for shaping and accessing data lets you take your data into any tool that you might need, in a format that will be familiar to them. It lets you organize and shape your operations data with valuable metadata and asset context. And it even removes many of the headaches usually involved with wrangling time series data across different streams. With easier access to trustworthy data, you can detect patterns and derive insights to improve your operations. With data views in OCS, users like data scientists and third-party service providers can make large queries for operations data without affecting the critical nature of the Pi server running on-prem. And with simple access to data through the cloud, new consumers bring more value to your operations. Now, talking about sharing access to that data brings us to the OCS Rest API. OCS provides a first-class developer experience. From scripting administrative functions to efficiently requesting data, our modern and flexible REST API enables users and applications easy access to the platform. Beyond supporting the capabilities in the OCS customer portal, the REST API is the key to integrating your operations data with partner applications and tools for data movement, collaboration, business intelligence, and machine learning. The API is extensively documented, and you can also find corresponding sample code on our GitHub to jumpstart any project. Now back to our demo. You saw earlier how Wintopia has integrated their global operations with OCS. They've aggregated, contextualized, and analyzed their data, and now they want to enable additional stakeholders and consumers. I'm going to show you first how to configure an OCS data view, and then how data views can be utilized to share data with different business partners and to enable data scientists with applications like Microsoft Power BI and Jupyter Notebook. All right, so here we are back in the OCS portal. I'm back on my home page here. Go ahead into full screen. All right, so I'm going to go back to my navigation pane, and we're going to first remind ourselves of the data that we're working with. So I'm going to go to the Asset Explorer. If you remember earlier, we were looking at these GE wind turbines that Todd was showing us. So I'll go ahead and click on one of these just so we can remember that we've got some metadata here that's interesting, and we also have a whole lot of properties. There's a lot of data on these. Well over 100 different unique pieces of information that we might be interested in, depending on what our use case or requirements are for our analysis or what we're doing with this information. So really, I need a more targeted or curated set of data for the analysis that I want to do in Power BI and Jupyter Notebook. So that's going to take us into creating a data view to do just that. So I'm going to go back to our navigation pane, and we will scroll down to the Data Views page and click on that. All right, So here we can see the list of data views that currently exist in our tenant and this specific namespace. And I'm going to start by editing one of these existing data views so you have a better idea of what the end result looks like, of what we're trying to create here. So I'm scrolling down to our kind of demo data view here, and then I go back up to the top and click on Edit Data View. Oh, that's great, of course. All right, so let's cancel that. Let's see if we can go back in here. All right, great, so it loaded that time. Okay, so what you can see here is our configuration and preview page for configuring data views. And this is where we both, on the left-hand side, you can see this is where we're doing the configuration, and then the majority of the real estate is taken up with a data table over here, which is actually a preview of the data that would be returned by this data view when we request that information. It's important to note that the data view is really a configuration. It's not a static set of data, and then you request the data for that configuration when you need it through the OCS REST API. So at the top here, we've got name and description for our data view. And then I'm going to skip over shape. We'll come back to that later. And then we have what's called the index configuration. Data views align different fields across your streams and assets along the same index. So if they share an index, then they can be grouped and aligned that way. So in this case, we're looking at a date time, a timestamp index. And so we're providing a start index, an end time range, and then also an interval. The interval is going to provide the indexes that we are actually using to return the data set. So in this case, we're interpolating on the hour every hour. And you can see that represented over here in this first column over here in the data table, this timestamp. So then we get to the list of actual data fields included in our data view. So if I scroll down over here, we have the index field, the timestamp that we just talked about. And then we have a grouping field. The grouping field helps to organize the data and provide additional context. In this this specific data view, this is actually set to the asset name. That's the information that we're bringing in. And you can see this represented in the second column here under name, GE01. If we scroll down, we'll get to GE02, and so on and so forth. So now you can see that that's immensely helpful in just knowing which data we're dealing with and which part of the table. And then finally, we have the individual properties or fields that we're including. In this case, we've got active power, some bearing temperatures, blade positions, and we see those represented in each of the resulting columns after that as well. But how did I get the information in this data view to begin with to start choosing these fields and properties I wanted to include? Well, that comes from a query. So I'm going to go up here, the first kind of button under Field Management, and click on Manage Queries. And that's going to take us back to the query that I had set this data view up with. So in a data view, you can query for either streams or assets to include in the data view. You can even create multiple queries if you need to include both streams and assets individually as well. The query that I have here is searching for the turbines by name. So I'm using GE star. Go ahead and zoom in on that so you can see. So I'm using GE star. So that's pulling in 16 different assets that we have with that naming scheme. And one of the things to notice here is that if I make my criteria for the query flexible, in this case using an asterisk, we can add a new asset that follows the same pattern, so something like GE17, and that will automatically get picked up and included in this data view going forward the next time that I resolve it and request data. So that's a good thing to keep in mind if you want your data views to be dynamic in nature. So I'm going to stick with these 16 assets that we've got here in the resulting query list. So we'll cancel out of this and head back to our configuration pane. So I've already narrowed down a set of interesting fields for this data view, but there are a few more additional pieces of information that I think it would be good to include. So I'm going to close these down a bit, get back to our field management pane down here at the bottom. And I don't have a whole lot of metadata information, so I'm going to add I'm going to click here on the Add button and add a field to get the wind farm. So I entered that in, and we found our wind farm metadata, and we will add that. So that metadata is on each of these assets. Oh, that's lovely. Let's see if I can get this to work. We'll reapply this. All right, there we go. Okay, save the day. Okay, so now we have this wind farm metadata, and you'll see that this has now appeared in our third column. So right after that grouping field and timestamp. So this is also immensely helpful and will be for the additional stakeholders and consumers that I share this data set with. Now I also want to add or really change one of these existing fields, this active power. So what I'm looking at here in this column is the interpolated data, but what I really want is the average for each of these 1 hour intervals. So I'm going to go back to add another data field. So click on that. And I want to pick the mean out. So I'm going to go ahead and filter these data fields down. And if you're wondering where all of these data fields are coming from, this is all of the information that's available on these assets that are included. And so that's why you have a lot of information here and a long list. So using this filter really helps us narrow down exactly what we want. All right, so now active power, here's my value property, and there's the mean. So I'm going to go ahead and check that and add it. Hopefully we don't run into an error again. And then we're going to see a new column show up directly to the right of the previous active power. So now we've got this active power value, so that's the interpolated data, and now we have the mean as well. All right, so I don't really need the first one, so I go ahead and remove that. So we'll click here, remove that, and we should be good to go once that reloads. There is another kind of option that I also want to add. You can see in a few of these column headers, we've got some units of measure. So for instance, kilowatts up here for the active power. But for my temperatures, I want to make sure that I'm pulling in the right unit of measure, because I think I have assets that have different units. For instance, both degrees Celsius and degrees Fahrenheit. So the way that I'm going to bring that in is to go back over to our temperature fields, select those, and then edit them. And the edit dialog gives me an option to include UOM field. And once we apply that, we're going to actually get two new columns here. And so I'll have the information for the units of measure directly next to the values that they represent. All right. So we're getting much closer. I think we're pretty much good to go. And there is one feature that I do want to show you. We're not going to end up using it in this specific use case, but it's pretty interesting and I want to show it to you. And that's coming back up here to our data view information and then looking at the data view shape. So far, we've been using the standard format. And that basically means that we shape the data so one measurement or property maps to a single column. But a common alternative, where users that want to look at their information still in a tabular view, but pivoting it so that you end up with a more generic schema. And we call this narrow mode. So with just the quick toggle there to narrow, I'm going to go ahead and apply that so you can see exactly what it looks like in this preview. We're going to end up with, we're going to keep our timestamp field. We still have our grouping field for that context. And then we have the field, the value, and the unit of measure here. So you can see that this is a little bit are really a lot more generic. These headers here, you can still rename them, but they're not the actual representations of the data or the measurement names. So when I scroll down here, you'll see that we start getting into the next set of information. So we move from the metadata into the active power. If I scroll through, we'll keep going into the bearing temperatures, and then eventually we'll go from GE01 to the next turbine until we complete the data set here. So I did want to show off that option. We're going to go ahead and revert that for the next set of demos and work that we do with this data view, but I did want you to see that pretty nifty item. So we'll go ahead and save that now. All right. So once we've got the data set in place that we need for our applications and users, we can move on to actually using that data, and we'll do that through the OCS Rest API. So one of the tools that we provide in the OCS portal to help with this is called the API console. It's pretty useful for getting to learn the REST API, as well as the different resources that exist in your OCS tenant. So going back to the navigation menu, I'm going to open this back up, and we'll scroll down to the bottom here under Developer Tools and click on API Console. So on the API console here, we have a type ahead feature that helps you navigate the different resources. And so I'm going to show you how we can find the data view that we were just looking at and just creating in the Dataviews page. And then I'll show you how to actually form the right request to get data from it. So if I click up here in our URI path, we're in the namespaces collection. So I'll type a / and then pick production. That's the namespace we're in. And then we'll find our way into the Dataviews collection for this namespace. And then I'm going to scroll back down to the bottom to pick out our Wintopia demo data view. And now I can finish picking out the data, the interpolated data call that we're going to make to return the data for this. So I'll do data and then interpolated. And now I get the form for the parameters that I need to request when I want to retrieve the data. So we'll use a start index. We will put in an end index. We'll do an interval here. And then I'm also going to add one more extra parameter up here for the form. Just so that we get it back in a nice, pretty easy to view and consume way. All right, so that came back pretty quickly. You can see this looks just like the preview that we were looking at on the other page, but this is how we get data for that configuration in real time. All right, so now that we know how to get the data through the API, we can look at how to share that with other consumers. Before we get to those applications, I do want to show you our GitHub samples. So let me exit out of this. And I'll come over here to our GitHub site where we have a whole section on OCS specific samples. And this is a really good place to come to get started if you need direction on how to integrate with OCS. We have a number of different samples in a number of different languages, and we cover a large number of tasks like authentication. You saw earlier Todd logging in. We do also offer some different client methods in order for applications and different types of users to provide and authenticate into OCS to get data. Then we have some tasks around dealing with the data and the data ingress itself. And then a few task-specific or integration-specific ones as well. So one of these that I do want to point out is actually a sample connector that we provide for Power BI at this time. So that's what I've clicked on in here. And this sample takes care of authentication with OCS and also allows users to input requests for OCS data. And I point this sample out specifically as it is exactly what we use to get data into this Power BI dashboard. So in this report, we have a few examples of how the Wintopia company has enabled different personas with different data views from OCS. This overview tab is more for stakeholders looking at the bottom line of the operations and really looking for the impact of production on revenue. They have some high-level information about the farm and the turbines, but really when you want to dig deeper, we have these kind of next to tabs for OEM vendors. These vendors are likely monitoring the turbines that they've provided to us and looking for potential issues as they do so. It's possible that Wintopia can also use the metadata in the assets to create different data views rather than having them all together. They could use this as a way to share that information discreetly and separately to the two vendors. So as we see what's possible in Power BI, remember that we're enabling this application and these different personas with data from OCS that's already been shaped for consumption and easy consumption in that point from Power BI. And we're using Dataviews to do that. Now, if an engineer or operator were to find something interesting in this dashboard, they may then loop in a data scientist for additional analysis. And they could continue with some exploration in Power BI, or they could jump into a tool like Jupyter Notebook. So let's go over here to our Jupyter Notebook. So here we've got an existing analysis that's already been completed, but I do kind of walk you through just so you can see how you might integrate with a data view through OCS, through Jupyter Notebook. So the first thing we're doing here is actually using another one of our samples. We have the OCS sample library preview for Python. So we've imported that. And that is helping us form the requests to first authenticate with OCS, which is what we're doing down here, and then to get the data back from the data view. Now, if I keep scrolling down here, you'll see the data. So this should look very familiar to what we were looking at in the OCS portal and the data views page with the preview, as well as the API console. So we've got our different timestamps and metadata, as well as the different properties that we're looking at. And once I bring that information in, it's very easy to store that as a pandas data frame. And then I basically can do everything that I need from there once it's in a pandas data frame. I can do some additional management of the labels and rearranging and shaping if I need to. And I can also get into some additional more complex plotting and heat map correlations. And finally, I can even start perhaps training in a machine learning algorithm if I want to look into some performance improvements and optimizations. So to recap, we learned how to create a data view, and then we learned how to get data for that. And then we shared that with a few additional stakeholders and different applications, integrating or showing really the power of the OCS REST API for integrating different applications with the platform. All right, so now we are going to head back into the slides for our next section. So we saw a few different things that we can do with OCS, but you may be wondering how we got the data in there to begin with. So we're going to talk briefly about data ingress just because of time here, but we do have a lot of different ways of collecting data and storing it in OCS. First, we apply to OCS. So for any of you current PyServer users out there, this is a product that we built specifically for moving PyServer data into OCS as easily as possible. Next, we have the Edge Data Store, or EDS, which gives you the option of storing some data locally on a small lightweight device. And it also supports running on multiple platforms. It can be used as a local application platform when you need to run local analytics or custom visualization apps on remote devices and assets themselves. And EDS can even be embedded into smart equipment made by our customers who manufacture equipment. We have Pi adapters, which are designed for cross-platform support, including Windows and Linux. They have a lightweight footprint, include data buffering for robust data collection, And these are ready off-the-shelf software products supported by OSIsoft. And finally, we have our OSIsoft message format, known as OMF. And this specification gives developers maximum flexibility to create custom data collection integrated into your equipment or IoT devices. And this can also send data directly to EDS, OCS, or Pi system, like the adapters can also do as well. Right, so a few more details specifically on Pi to OCS. So this is your easy button for existing Pi server users to transfer data from their on-prem servers into OCS. You can download the Pi to OCS agent, set up security to your Pi server, and then bring both history and real-time data from Pi tags into OCS with just a few clicks. And the Pi to OCS agent runs on-prem, but configuration of the data that you want to transfer and the management of that is managed centrally from the cloud in the OCS customer portal. That is what I'm going to demo quickly for you here right now. We will take a look at the agent connection that I've set up and then create a new data transfer. So we'll go back in here in our OCS portal, back to our navigation menu, and I will come down here to connections. All right. Reload that. All right, there we go. We're in production. I want to change namespaces to development because that's where I'm going to create this new transfer, different namespace. Go back into full screen there. Okay, so you can see this connection here, Pi to OCS demo. I've already created that. So we've already downloaded and installed the Pi to OCS agent. And I've given it the right security access into my Pi server in order to now configure the data transfer. So I'll go over here to the right and click Add Pi Point Transfer. And this brings up a search screen. So I'm going to search quickly for a few tags to bring in. All right, I can click those and move them over to our transfer list. Real quickly, I'll point out that you do have other ways of searching for your more common Pi tag attributes if you need that. And this search is also iterative if you need to now go back and do a different search and then pull in different tags as well. And then down here at the bottom, we have this historical start time. So what this does is tell us, or really tell the agent how far back in time to go to pull data from our Pi tags into OCS streams. So I'm going to go ahead and change this. We'll go back to the 1st of March, and then we'll click on Add Transfer. All right, so we added that transfer, and now we're going to go ahead and start it. And so while it's starting up, what it's doing is the agent is creating any necessary stream types and then the corresponding streams. So each Pi tag turns into a corresponding OCS stream. And hopefully you just saw where our status over here for the data transfer moved to the current activity being sending historical data and sending streaming data. So these statistics should start updating once we've gotten all of the stream types and streams created and loaded into memory, and then we can go ahead and then once this information does update, we will trend that. And hopefully we will see some data coming in. All right, so that should be starting any second now. I'll go ahead and make my way over to our trend. Oh, there we go. All right. So we're moving back to the development namespace. And we'll add just this first value here. All right, so you can see we've got some data in. This is just for the last 8 hours. So how about I go ahead and enter a custom range in here so we can capture the beginning of that. So we'll go back to 228 and we'll look at 3.1. 32. All right. So we should see once this loads. Okay, there we go. So you can see we didn't have any data that we brought in from 2/28 or before, but we do start having the data on March 1st. And so we're getting in the historical data, and we're also catching up with the current data as well. All right, so that is just how easy it is to get data into OCS and get started. So now we'll head back to the slides as that wraps up our demo portion. So I know that was a lot of information. Hopefully it's been very interesting over the past hour, but we do have a few more resources that we want to point you to before you leave, and we'll include these links in the event description. First, you'll find the corporate landing page for OCS. That leads you to a lot of the customer stories and existing presentations that we've given around OCS so that you can continue to see what other customers are doing and how to use the platform. You'll also see a link to the OCS customer portal and specifically the Trust Center, where you can learn about all things security, including a number of the frequently asked questions that we get regarding cloud and our technology. Now, I also want to point out a video that we just released, and it's highlighting OCS as the fastest way to share OT data in the cloud. This is on our OSIsoft News YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe to it and also this OSIsoft Learning channel to keep up with the latest resources. And then finally, I'm also including a link to sign up for a learning course that we have on enabling enterprise-wide data science with OCS Dataviews. So this will show you in even greater detail about Dataviews, and integrating with Jupyter Notebook as well. Now, hopefully we've piqued your interest enough, and if you have a use case already in mind that you'd like to discuss further, we do have an early adopter program called Lighthouse, where you can get complete access to an OCS tenant, as well as any pre-release features that we have available at that time as well. So if you'd like to learn more about this program and see if your scenario is a good fit, please do contact myself or Todd and reach out to this team directly at lighthouse@osisoft.com as well. All right, so thank you everybody for attending our event today. We hope this has been informational and interesting for you to watch. If you do want to talk further, you can find our email addresses here. And I think we have time for a few questions as well if we got anything interesting in the chat.
All right. Yeah. So thanks, Todd and Liz, for going through all that content for us. That was great. Demos were awesome. But before we jump into the questions, I just want to remind everyone of the additional resources in the description of the video. We do have that webinar on the release of OCS in the Azure Marketplace, so definitely check that out. And then everything else that Liz mentioned is all linked down below, including any additional questions you have. Go to the Pi-Square post, comment them there, and we'll get back to you. So yeah, before we finish up for the day, let's take a couple questions. Two of them, I think we want to just two since we're running a little short on time. The first one is, what options do I, as a user, have to authenticate in OCS?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, great question. So within OCS, you control and manage the identity providers used for authentication within OCS. And we currently support Azure Active Directory, Microsoft, and Google. And so you can configure your identity provider to enable security features like multi-factor authentication, which is the thing that I ran into in the middle of this demo. And the other thing I wanted to mention about security is, and we didn't have too much time to show security management today, but within OCS you can create roles and then control access to streams and assets and data views and all of our resources using those roles. If you want more information on security, there was a link to our Trust Center that you can find at cloud.osisoft.com as well.
Very cool. Thank you, Todd.
Yep.
And then second question was, do you need a Pi server to get data into OCS?
I can take this one. So no, you do not need a Pi server. it's not required to use OCS. You could also ingress data directly to OCS from our Edge data store or using one of our Pi adapters or OMF as well with a custom application. But if you do have an existing Pi server and need to utilize that information in OCS, we do make it very easy to go ahead and leverage that existing data using our Pi to OCS product.
All right. Awesome. Very cool. Thank you, Liz. So that's all the time we have today. Again, all the resources down below. Check them out if you are interested in following up with any of this. And yeah, reach out to us, contact, and thank you for joining us today. Hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.